This is everything that you need to know before you go to your Spider-Man pre-release event this week. So if you only have 5 minutes, you're going to want to watch this video because I'm going to cover all of the important topics. And make sure you stay to the very end because I've got some bonus tips about how to just win more games overall in Sealed. So first, let's talk about the archetypes and colors, and it is important to know that only the allied color pairs are being supported in this set. So there's only 5 color pairs that you should try to play in. The other 5, which I'll go over on the next slide, are not supported. And I've focused to highlight the first 3 here, which are the ones that actually are the most synergy based, and then the last 2 color pairs are more of just putting good cards in your deck. So green-white is focused on the new web slinging mechanic, which is basically like a sorcery version of ninjutsu. Blue-white is focused on modified creatures, putting +1/+1 counters or equipment on your creatures, and black-red is focused on the new mayhem mechanic, which is very similar to madness but at sorcery speed. And the last 2 color pairs are red-green, which focuses on creatures power 4 or greater, but that's not really a synergy piece you need to build around, just play your red and green cards. And then there's blue-black, which focuses on the new creature type of villains, and those 2 color pairs obviously have a lot of villains, but there's also villains sprinkled throughout other colors as well. And as I mentioned earlier, this set only supports the allied color pairs, which you can see here, and then I've crossed off all of the enemy color pairs. So try not to build your deck with, for example, red-white as its base. And then some of the rares and mythics do come in 3 colors, like Bant or Esper, and so you may want to splash for some of the more powerful stuff. Next, let's talk about the newer set mechanics, and there's some old returning ones, like Modified and things like that, but those are pretty straightforward, and those also will be explained to you on the card. So let me just walk you through the new mechanics, and the first one is web slinging. And web slinging is basically like ninjutsu, but at sorcery speed. And you can only do it after combat, or if you can tap your creatures using a vehicle or some other effect like that. So you're going to want to build your deck around other creatures that have good enter the battlefield abilities or leaves the battlefield abilities. You don't want anything that has a dies trigger because it won't be triggering it, it's just going back to your hand. And keep in mind, unlike ninjutsu, because ninjutsu is done right before the damage step, you can counter the creatures that have web slinging. Some of the web slinging creatures have it at a discount, and then some of them have web slinging for a higher cost, but you get more of a benefit. Next is Mayhem, which is very similar to Madness, but you can only cast these cards at sorcery speed, or whatever the speed is or the timing restriction of the card. So a lot of them that have Mayhem are going to be creatures in this set. There are some sorcery speed Mayhem cards, and those can only be cast at sorcery speed. So it's a little bit different than Madness, but you can cast it for the duration of the entire turn. So there are some black or red cards that let you discard cards at the beginning of your combat step, and then after that you can then cast your Mayhem card in your second main phase. And then the last one here, there are some modal-faced double-sided cards, and the one thing I want to point out is that you can cast it for either side of these cards. Now, if you look at this example, Norman Osborn, if you play it for the cheaper side, the 2-mana side, you can then transform it later by paying the Grixis cost, and it can transform into Green Goblin. If you play Green Goblin first, you cannot transform it to Norman Osborn, so it can only be transformed the other way. Next, I want to point out some of the combat tricks that you want to know, and the good news is this is a much smaller set than usual, so there's really only 4 combat tricks you need to worry about, 2 in white, 1 in green, and 1 in black. Most of them cost 2 mana, except for Thrip. So if your opponent makes a suspicious attack, that's probably why they have one of these cards. And then, of course, you want to make sure that you play around any of the board wipes, and again, because this is a smaller set, there's only 2 board wipes, and both of which are in black. So if your opponent is not in these colors, feel free to overextend and play as many creatures as you want. So now I want to go through some general tips to help you win more games at Sealed and in your pre-release. And the first thing is that you want to have at least 6 removal spells in your deck because you're playing Sealed, so your opponents and you get to open up 6-pack, which means you can have up to 6 rares or 6 potential bombs or really good cards in your decks or in your opponent's decks. And sometimes even some of these uncommons need to be killed right away these days. And it's okay to splash a 3rd color if you can get more removal into it. Now, let's just say that in your pool, you absolutely get 0 removal spells, and this happens sometimes. So if you want to win more games, I would highly encourage you to build your deck more aggro and then use your combat tricks as your form of removal and then try to end the game earlier so that even if your opponent has really expensive bombs, it's not going to matter because you're ending the game a lot faster. And my next big tip is in Sealed, you want to play as many of your bombs or your rares as possible, and it's totally fine to play 3 colors. I highly discourage against playing 4 colors unless you have really, really good fixing. So what are the best ways to fix your mana in this set? Well, there's an Evolving Wilds variant in Vibrant Cityscape shape here. And then there's a bunch of dual lands that will take the common land slot in your packs, so you may get some of these. Again, they only support the allied color pairs. There is a uncommon daily bugle building, which lets you filter mana, and then if you are in green, you can either make treasures, or you can search for basic land cards. Sealed is about a half turn slower than draft because decks aren't as synergistic, so it's okay if you hurt your mana base a little bit if it lets you put more power into it. So follow these tips if you want to win more games this weekend and get more free packs in your Spider-Man pre-release. And of course, please click subscribe because I'm going to be posting a ton of new draft content for the Spider-Man set, and I'm also going to have a video coming out explaining the best strategies for this new Pick 2 draft coming up.